that brings in aspects of freedom, that captures in aspects of this entire unity, the efforts that African leaders have been trying way back with the efforts of independence, efforts of, the African liberation. Now, to begin with, Tyson, today's topic is something very pertinent that has to do with the matters in South Africa. But in as much as we are looking at South Africa, we are going to scale and get perspective from different parts of Africa, because in Africa, we believe unity is so key. We have our panelists from Uganda, our panelists from Ghana, and our panelists from South Africa. Nana, who is an American by residence right now, but a Ghanaian by origin. So ladies and gentlemen, at this point of time, let me first begin by tasking my panelists to introduce themselves, and beginning with Comrade Tyson. Tyson, kindly introduce yourself to us so that the audience get to understand as we delve into the depth of this discussion. Tyson, unmute and introduce yourself to details. Thank you.
Thank you, Odong. Yes, I am Tyson. I am Tebato Tyson. As the name would highlight, I am in South Africa, so I guess I become pertinent in the discussion when we focus on xenophobia as a phenomena that is currently being experienced by South Africa. But yeah, that is all I can say about myself, Dr. Arthur. I am Tebato Tyson. I am a resident of South Africa. I will be able to unmute my, or rather, unhide my face when I get settled and I am on the I'm not on my mobile because right now I'm moving around. But then otherwise, yes, I will argue, I will make arguments, and I will make submissions on behalf of what we would quote unquote in colloquial refer to as Pan-Africanism. But at the end of the day, I'm an Afrocentric individual, and perhaps that will bring in some perspectives that we are not familiar with or we are not comfortable with, and that is perhaps why I joined the discussion. But then I guess that will suffice as an introduction for now. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks very much, Tyson. As you've made introduce yourself, you'll be so critical in trying to set the entire pace of discussion, because you and in the soup, you understand the entire core as someone who is in there. And then our other panelists will have a lot to add in, so that we have this entire African perspective as we draw an entire scale of then how then do we proceed. Let's have our next panelists introduce themselves. Comrade Nana, please kindly introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Nana Oting. I am originally from Ghana. I'm based in Houston, Texas. I'm an educator. I was trained as an engineer, geological engineer, and came to America, did my master's, and decided to get into education. I'm now also an entrepreneur, where I'm going now. But I'm a Pan-Africanist. I call myself pro-African. I'm more interested in African businesses and how we can, create businesses globally. So I'm a pro-African, ready to, connect with fellow Africans. I think I know Tyson. We used to be in the same group. So we are going to connect and see how we can address this topic as well.
Thanks very much, Comrade Nana, and thanks very much for coming onto the panel. Yes, and then next on the list of our panelists, we have Comrade Mugabe John. Mugabe John, introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the questions of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, Mr. Dongo, for organizing this. And I would also like to thank the panelists and all those who are listening and viewing us for at least being able to come at this particular time and have a conversation on what is happening here and there. But first of all, I'm Mugabe John Socrates. I'm the team leader of a think tank called Action for Liberty and Economic Development. It is based here in Uganda. It promotes a free and prosperous society with aspects of entrepreneurship and individual liberty. I am a libertarian. I believe freedom everywhere matters, not only in Africa, but I'm also an individualist who believe and also fight for individual liberty, and each person is freedom of speech and to exist everywhere. I do believe as a libertarian that freedom anywhere is an opportunity. Freedom beyond Africa is an opportunity. Freedom in Africa is an opportunity. And I also believe that as individuals, we are more at a better place if we can cooperate, can work together, and we can find what makes us to live a free and prosperous society. I don't enclave myself or my mindset in one place or Ugandan. I believe being a Ugandan is not a privilege, being an African is not a privilege, but being a human, an individual is the greatest privilege any person may have. Thank you very much. That is it, Mr. Don.
All right, thanks very much, Comrade Mugabe. Now, getting into the matter, I'll give a brief context on what we're going to discuss today. It's a topic that is questioning the reality between the sense of unity, trade, and then the fights. A brief context comes in that South Africa has historically been viewed as a symbol of African liberation. We all know that way back from the efforts of South Africa to fight apartheid, to come and get one of the great countries that got its independence of late, it was a sense of symbolization, a sense of the African cry, where different countries, neighboring countries, had to give in a lot of efforts to ensure South Africa, the apartheid, comes to a quench. But then we do understand that we have had waves of xenophobic attacks that have really commenced in South Africa. And these, on the contrary, are targeted on fellow Africans who are claimed to be foreigners. We recall very well that in 2008, 2015, 2019, and then another subsequent attack came of late with a declaration of an ultimatum, with a lot of marches being phrased on to ensure foreign citizens who are claimed, quote unquote, those who are illegal in South Africa must leave South Africa. Now here comes, I bring in Tyson. Tyson, can you give us the entire context? Because from our end of view, we do get the entire argument that the march or the move, the xenophobic move, is against the undocumented immigrants. But then the wave of the actions, as we are seeing from these other lanes on the media, seems to go way beyond just the trace for the undocumented immigrants. Closing businesses of fellow Africans, tagging other Africans as foreigners, bringing aspects of unemployment. So please, at this point, Tyson, before we start debunking and quenching everything, can you give us the entire context, the history, and the justification upon which South Africans are echoing this entire march and pushing for this xenophobic movement? Tyson, unmute and give us a say.
No, thanks, Odong. Well, we need to consider South Africa's reality in its correct setting. I was listening to pundits during the week, and they are mentioning that hunger does not have rationality. It does not apply ration. Right now, I must make a rational argument. But what happens is that you are speaking to a country. If I'm setting the context, the country that you're speaking about, South Africa, I know that it looks like a gem for other Africans or for the rest of Africa. It is called the gateway to Africa. But South Africa is in the world, South Africa is the most unequal society. So we take that into consideration. And what does unequal mean in the context of South Africa? Unequal means that majority Black people, majority Africans are poor and wanting. And the minority white in Okay, how can I phrase this in a way that is palatable? The minority Europeans, whites, who are, in a sense of speaking, able to access those facilities during apartheid that were for blankets. So those Europeans today own basically 95% of South Africa. So as much as other Africans value South Africa, South Africa does not belong to Africa. South Africa is a colony, continues being a colony. So when we look at South Africa today, according to its statistics that are government produced, there is a 40% unemployment. And it actually escalates to 60% unemployment with the youth. So 40% of the country is unemployed. 60% of the youth is unemployed. That is like, a ready-made army for any instigation that would happen. And I've heard Prof. PLO refer to these people as vigilantes, half-naked vigilantes. That is exactly what is happening, because you can always spark what is already made to, it's ready made to be sparked, because we have this 40% unemployment. What does that entail in the context of Africa?
Just to interject a little bit, getting your statistics right, you say 95% of South Africa is owned by the whites. So that leaves approximately 5% for the blacks, as you're trying to make it. But then the entire paradigm or the entire benchmark of the xenophobic attack is not claiming for that 95% that you have put in statistics, but rather targeting the fellow Africans whom you are tagging as immigrants. Can you give some context to that as we bring in some other panelists?
Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing context to that. You see, that is the problem that I have as an Afrocentric person, because I see that as Africans in South Africa, we are targeting the wrong people. We are targeting the wrong, we have the wrong side, because what we need to be doing is to undo colonization and really claim our sovereignty, but we are not doing that. As a pathology that perhaps Dr. Cornel West speaks of, is that the weak in society, as we are in South Africa, Black people, we will target the weak also. We are not going to change anything. And we know, by the way, we know that when we target these quote unquote illegal immigrants or African immigrants, when the effect comes in, I mean, it is cloned as anti-illegal immigrant, but at the end of the day, illegal immigrants are not targeted. What is targeted is African immigrants. So the people who are on flights in the repatriation, perhaps in Ghana or in Zimbabwe or in Sudan, those people are the quote unquote documented immigrants. So what is happening is that as the weak people in society, we've got a pathology to also target the other weak people. Not that we know that we are going to change anything, but just for the effect that we need agency as an existing human being also.
All right, thanks very much, Tyson, for bringing in that context. And if I'm to get you right, you acknowledge that the South Africans are targeting the wrong people, right? And the entire movement has been framed on that. Now, let's get the context from the other parts of Africa. Comrade Nana, you've been a Ghanaian for a while, nevertheless being in the US, but you can view the context in the world. Of late, we saw Ghana taking the first step of repatriating its citizens. And we had a lot of backlash, a lot of threats from the Ghanaian authorities saying, yes, let companies like MTN, let companies, the mining companies in Ghana also get back and take their jobs to South Africa, so that the Ghanaians we are bringing from South Africa to come and take the jobs that the South African companies are taking on in Ghana. Now, let me get your perspective on this entire matter and also bring it in the trajectory of the African unity. and the sense of Africa. Comrade Nana, can you give your perspective of the matter as we get to John?
Thank you, Arthur. I appreciate it very much. This xenophobia thing is very complex, and I know what the directions that my government took, Ghana government took, was the right one. However, I want us to look at the historical events. This did not start today, right? As far back as 1986, they had what they called the Operation Cleanup. 1986. At that time, the blacks had not had any independence or freedom. They call it Operation Cleanup. At that time, the Africans were deported. Over 300,000 were deported from South Africa. In essence, mostly came from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, right? This was in 86. And this had continued. We have to know where this is coming from. They call them all the names I can think of. The aliens are stealing their jobs. They call them disease-ridden rats. This was a calculated strategy to divide the Black community. And then when the ANC took over, all right, instead of solving it, they also perpetuated it for political advantage, right? So this wasn't addressed. So anytime I hear of xenophobia, I always look at the historical event. But we must overcome that. And before we can succeed, we have to know what it means. It is making sure they divide the Black community to, help the white community. And until we understand that connection, it's going to be very difficult. I don't believe in the fact that Ghana should sack one or the other. What I believe is this. Until we can get to the point where we can make our people successful wherever they are, and I mean globally, we're going to have those problems. So these guys are just picking up people that they see as helpless, but they have been engineered. It's not by accident. We have to look at the back. They have been engineered to do this way. As Africans and as a Ghanaian, as pro-African, I want us to always remember that anytime we have such problems on the continent, the goal is to divide us and make us weaker. They also want that picture, right? That we are fighting against each other. And all of a sudden, we are seeing it in Ireland and other places. So for now, this is what I can say about it. And as time goes on, I will move on. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thanks very much. Now, this brings me to Mugabe. Mugabe, you have been a great economist on the African landscape, but nevertheless, putting in the context of the globalization, as Nana puts it, that we really need to look at the global aspect as well. Now, we have seen arguments of loss of jobs, attacks, but then also this entire of late Botswana blocked a number of vehicles that were crossing from South Africa to Botswana. We are seeing many of the labor forces going back. We are seeing shops closing. As a market proponent, or as someone who is somewhat proponent of the market and making sense of humanity instead of just the centrism of African or these border points and also relating it to the efforts of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Can you try make sense of this entire xenophobic matter or make an argument either pro or against it? Thanks, John.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Dong, and the panelists for that great enrichment. But I would like to say, Odong, as a person who has been lucky and fortunate to see some of the world history, I've seen Uganda, Asian, becoming a mayor of New York, and the whole African continent celebrates, and Uganda starts saying it is ours. I was lucky enough to see the first African American president who made the whole African continent very, very, very happy, celebrating But I've also seen in Uganda, Rwanda, I think a guy of Rwanda, this is born in Uganda, but parents were all Rwandese, failing to be a minister. And then it creates debates because he's having a passport of also Rwanda, which is almost a neighbor to Uganda. I've seen many, but I would like to say this is a very interesting discussion. I, for one, have been in South Africa for at least 2 times, and it's great. We've been mostly discussing about the economic factor and the economic freedom which the continent need. I admit that in South Africa, if you're there, if you're in Johannesburg, you could see different countries within even a capital city. You could see Johannesburg being like a European city, and then when you get out, you see a typical African community. But we should understand that what xenophobia is. Xenophobia is the fear of the foreigner. It's typically the fear of the foreigners, and it's not coming from anywhere except the economic perspective. We should understand very well that when the economic pie of any country, any community becomes small, then people naturally will start looking around and say, who is taking our pie? Who is taking our pie? And the eyes will land on people they call foreigner or people who just came in, who are not born there. This is not only African, it has started in America. America, like President Reagan said, used to be a country where everyone can leave Japan, can leave France, and then the next year you become an American. It's the only country which had that, where you can live and then become an American, and no one would say this. But as the pie is becoming so small, the economic freedom is narrowing, that very many people are not able to access the economic opportunity, cannot access what gives them survival, cannot access what is going to give them a better life. Then the eyes of the people start looking around and discover who is a stranger, who is taking our opportunity. The issue which is happening to South Africa is not only the looking at the weakest. It is the failure of the economy which is lifting other people, maybe who are hardworking, who are connected, who have good education. It's not lifting the rest who are not having that. And the policy in South Africa, we must admit, it has failed to create this opportunity for all those people to be able to work, to be able to earn, and to be able to live. So the South African people now, because they have limited access to the pie, they are looking at those who came in. And this is what is happening. If you look at the statistics of South Africa, the last census, they are they are 500 people from the Chinese, the great Chinese, including Taiwan, 500,000. We have 50,000 Ugandans, and they said 20,000 of them are not legally registered in South Africa. They just entered there to find also their way of working and find means. And they have not attacked. This one also, we should be seeing this on African continent, since we have Pan-Africans. The 500,000 Chinese who are in South Africa, including the Taiwan, no single person out of the 500 who are working there, who came in to find livelihood there, no one is being attacked. But then the 50,000 Ugandan with 20,000, the government say they are not legally there, they are becoming a threat. We could also say some psychological understanding on the issue of Pan-Africanism or the African mindset. It's not only attacking the weak, but it is also the issue of our mindset. We usually have this Pan-Africanism, which we talk about. So I would say, Mr. Don, on this, that we may discuss, we may blame the South African. It's true, xenophobic is wrong. But we must also look at where it is stemming from, that the government of South Africa has narrowed the opportunity, because South Africa just got its independence in 1994. But the South Africans have realized that there are no opportunities. And then the migrants all over the world, they become hardworking, they risk. So once they land in that country, they are willing to take any job without shame, without what. So now they are looking at them as people who are taking the opportunities. But we know very well that these jobs are not also going to be taken over by South Africa. Like Marema said, you have chased away people who are selling apples on street, yet you are not willing in your own country to vend apples. Yet you are chasing away a Zimbabwean who is vending these apples. And if you look at because most of the African migrants are not in these elite jobs. They are in simple jobs which are created through the market, which they are vending food. They are also barber shops and so others. And they are not the most paying jobs. But the South African believe that that is also a problem. So I would like to say that this is a big challenge to us as an African, that we must give economic freedom and opportunity. We must make sure we have policies which can enable everyone to be able to make money, to be able to live and sustain themselves. And the African continental free trade is one of the silver bullet. Because imagine that South African, a country, as you said, during its apartheid time, everywhere, most of the African country, including Uganda, had to at least get South African, who would be the labels, the ANC, had to do their trainings and so forth in Uganda. But then today, South Africa believe like, no, we should start doing this. But I believe it's not the issue of the strong. They might have started with the Africans, but at the end of the day, they will also start with the government. You will see the rebel groups coming up, attacking their own government. And then the whites are going also to be attacked at a certain point as it started, and they start leaving. What I would like to say is that South Africa has, according to their 2022 statistics, they have at least 2.5, around 2.5, from 2 to 2.5 million migrants, those who came in. And most of them are not in the big, what we would say, in the middle class jobs. They are not working in the middle class jobs, but they have created the simple low income jobs, and they have invited their parents, they have invited their friends, they have relatives to take over this, because the nature of also South African, as you know, this, I don't know whether it's because of apartheid, but as I was in South Africa, there is also a sense of entitlement. The South Africans believe that they were subjugated to apartheid for quite long. They were mistreated for so long. And there is a thinking that it's time for them to live a better life, to be given all these privileges because they suffered for so long. And if you look at that entitlement, it also keeps on affecting most of the South Africans, because they believe that we are entitled, like some of the African people who believe like they colonize us, we faced all the atrocities of the people from Europe and others, and we need at least to be given a special privilege. We need to be given a special privilege either in UN, either in Security Council. We need to have money flowing because we are orphans. Many South Africans have that mindset, and that's why they feel like there is something which should come. But I do believe, Mr. Dong, that we need to dig deeper and see how we as African can challenge ourselves and break these barriers, so that a South African can trade with Zimbabwe, a South African can trade with Ugandans, and they can be able also to have skills. Our Ugandans who are going in South Africa, they need to be going there trained to be helping South African to do what they cannot do better also. So the African Continental Free Trade is trying to address that, but there is a reality that there is no Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is a myth. And a country which has no economic opportunities will look at who is an outsider. If the outsider is a Kenyan, no matter whether the Secretariat of African Union is in Uganda or is in Ethiopia, they will make sure they chase away the Kenyans, because they should be the last people to at least to gain from our economy or to live. So The issue of the economic barriers the Africa is facing is causing many things, and these are just starting. We started with people drowning in Mediterranean Sea, but those who cannot drown in Mediterranean Sea looking for opportunities, then they have started looking at the fellow Africans. And after finishing fellow Africans, I don't know what is going to happen. They will blow the whole African, and then we shall face our hell. So we need to be working on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Comrade John, for that submission. Now, this leads me to Tyson, because John's submission tries to a little bit link to what Tyson said, that 95% of the lucrative part of the wealth in South Africa is not owned by the Africans, and that now leaves the 5%. But then it also creates that sense of competition, because in the market space where we think competition makes you better, in this scenario, again, we are seeing competition becoming a threat and then trying to, welcome this entire movement. Now, Comrade Tyson, you who is in South Africa, because my only picture and memory and history of South Africa is this good space that is well developed that we actually thought countries like Uganda should benchmark on. It's one of the cities that are way organized, irrespective of being a Black or, a white community. So, Tyson, could you maybe give us a hint, basing on this entire merge, its premise, what have been the evident impact, or what have been the evident success, or maybe what has yet gone wrong, basing on the pre-calculated moves in this? Because we may be criticizing it from the entire surface, yet maybe you who are in South Africa are seeing that, oh yeah, we can tick some boxes. So Tyson, please, you can unmute and give what is the progress like? Or do you really feel like it should really stop us where it is? Or you really anticipate that South Africa is getting, a taste of their own medicine, something like that? Tyson?
Comrade Odeng, I'm just getting on my mobile here, rather on my laptop, and I'm trying to get rid of my mobile connection. So you might hear some feedback, but yeah, I think I will be good now. If you can just confirm that, I can also activate my camera.
It's okay, you're clear.
No, thank you, sir. No, I think Mugabe speaks to the economic reality. As we speak to the subject, the economic reality versus the need for unity. Where do we find ourselves as Africans, as Afrocentrist? Because, Mugabe speaks of this thing, or maybe perhaps before I respond, my camera is the thing here that closes. There we go.
Yeah, we can see you, Tyson.
No, the African reality, like I said, these are hungry people. You need to appeal to hungry people. Hunger does not have rationality in it. Just the next meal will do at points in time. And that is the most fertile soil for economic, rather, as we speak right now in South Africa, for economic, not economic rather, but for political gain. Because just a couple of months away, we'll be going into the local election where the councillors and mayors are elected. And what the news is doing is to create a sense that immigration, though they quote it as illegal immigration, they are saying that African immigration is a topical issue in the local election, and they are trying to capitalize on that. There are parties that are specifically focusing on that. So those parties are perhaps contra, if I can speak the reality of South Africa. They are perhaps contra to the reality. Of course, I stay in one of the provinces, national of provincial capital rather, and you find that I think there was like 2 or 3 matches that happened anti-xenophobic, but that is a city
that is where the news is broadcast. Those are the people who receive the SABC, the ETV. Those are the people who receive the majority of the news that is happening in South Africa. Those are the people who are fed what to think by the system. So their thinking is basically what the ruling class wants them to believe. So, of course, I live in the capital city. I've seen a match or two, but that when you speak about 50% of the village, let's speak democratic about it. Let's speak about 50% of the village. Let's talk about 60% of the country. That is the unemployed people. They are not able to access the luxuries that we take for granted, like going on meetings on Zoom and being on TikTok and on YouTube and on uh, Facebook. Those things we take them for granted. But there are individuals in South Africa, 50% and more, who basically don't care what's happening on the news. And those are the people that are Africans. Those are the people that retain our values as a people. So when we try today to appeal to the educated, to appeal to the advanced cohort of society in contemporary definitions, we find that we cannot actually speak to these people because they have lost their identity. They are no longer Africans. They are Europeans masquerading as African administrators. So we then end up with a permanent contradiction that we cannot speak to these people because they are not speaking the same language as we are. But I hope in one way or another, I have tried, Dr. Odong, to just, address your concern. But majorly, when you look at it, what is happening in South Africa? There is a former president who served for like a couple of months as an interim president who said that there is always a protest happening in South Africa. Every day there is at least one protest happening in South Africa. So that would mean that there are 365 protests happening in South Africa. How we end up with this anti-African perspective on our screens is also questionable. Of course, we have to debate it, but we are debating within a framework that we are given by the system. The system dictates what we get to discuss and what we get to, make topical. But at the end of the day, in the context of South Africa, we are still discussing the minor issues. The major issues are still not divided, are still not discussed. How we get the 95% economy back is still not a topic in South Africa. So I guess I've got a problem with that. Thank you.
So, okay, Tyson, as you get off, are you trying to say the media is doing what they call selective publicity, that the march is not only targeted to Africans, but generally all foreigners in your own context?
Yes, no, like I guess what I'm saying is that the fact that it is becoming topical now, as Nana said, it back in 2008 we had the same thing. Back in 2019 we had the same thing. How it becomes a topical issue is because the system wants us to discuss it at the time. Because, well, I said to frame it that in South Africa now we have got a provincial election happening. And by the way, I have to mention this because people say that I hate Malema and all. But Malema has said two statements that we seem not to understand. And he said them directly. He said that if you hate Africans, don't vote for me. And I don't know why we keep on trying to get him to debate, because he said that if your vote is xenophobic, I don't want your vote. Don't vote for me if you base your whole identity on forgetting who Africans are. Africans are the people who liberated South Africa. I don't believe in the concept of South Africa in as much as I don't believe in the concept of Uganda. I don't think that Africans sat down to actually discuss what Uganda is or what South Africa is. It was a colonial construct, majorly because of companies that were sent to Africa and to the rest of the world by the Britons, by the British to actually dictate what the world should become. That is what we are today. So we speak about modernity and we speak about Western modernity, which in its basic form is just simply capitalism, the extraction of wealth from the rest of the world, the extraction of wealth from Africa, which if we are not united as Africa, as Kwame Nkrumah had suggested in his neocolonialism epic, we are never going to get it right if we are not united. So I am going to speak for unity over the economic, what seems to be the economic imperative of the present time. I'm going to say that if Africa is not united, Africa is not going anywhere. There's no way Uganda is going without the rest of Africa. Kenya is not going to go anywhere without the rest of Africa. South Africa is not going anywhere if Africa is not advancing. So thank you, Odo.
Thanks very much, Tyson. I wanted to bring in Comrade Nana. I think he has briefly jumped off the call. You did cite something very interesting and describe capitalism as extortion and exploitation of wealth. And I really appreciate how you brought it. First of all, complaining of wealth in itself, of only 5% being the wealth available to be scrambled for. And anyways, not to enter into the entire debate, let me bring in Comrade Mugabe because Comrade Nana seems to have jumped off the call. Comrade John, you have had the deliberations of, oh, Nana is back. But okay, Comrade Nana, you let me know when you're ready to speak, then I'll bring you in. You had the deliberations of Comrade Tyson. Comrade Tyson makes an emphasis that he prioritizes unity over economic gains. Now, I want us to really look at what really fosters the beauty of the game. What makes more sense is unity at a level whereby you have to fight for the small and chase those you think are taking the small that is available, that's sensible, or the economic beauty of developing that much that instead of fighting the other, you're actually supporting the others to grow to a particular level. Comrade John, can you give a brief insights and answer to a brief of what Tyson has said? Then quickly we bring in Comrade Nana. I see Nana is back as we give our final shots.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to appreciate Comrade for bringing in that. We need unity, and unity is needed everywhere. But unity, there always must be reason which unity is built on. And in Africa, we have political unity where we have this AU, African Union. For me, I call it a political union because it brings in politicians, it brings in dictators, and they discuss and they take photos and also discuss sometimes what is happening, but nothing they can do because they agreed to have a political kind of semblance in that way, that African Union. And I'm so much interested in the reality because if you look at African continental free trade, it could unite us if we agree because the unity which we would require today, it must also be built on issues of opportunity. Natural opportunities can unite people, and also the need to have that unity if there is a need. But as we agree that the issue is economical, the xenophobia we have today, it's stemming from the economic realities that country is having. And we must also appreciate that it's not only in South Africa, though the South Africa, it's a bit too much. It is at a certain degree. And it's happening in many countries in Africa, even including in Uganda. Today we have people who are complaining about Somalis taking on all these small jobs. However, people are not so much aggressive to raise up like in the South Africa and chase away. But the rhetoric and also the street talks, you feel that there is also a kind of xenophobia boiling around Africa. I would say, as I respond, that the issue is going to come from the productive people. South Africa might have its own history dating from the apartheid, but we must also look at the productivity. There is an envy which raises up in society when there is a productive side living a very good life because they are productive, and then on the other side, there is a less productive, it may be less productive because of the system. When one side is less productive because the system is designed to make them crippled and not to make them productive. So the reality which comes in always is as one of the great scholars said, poverty is the greatest, it always causes a revolution. And this, what we are seeing in Africa, it's a revolution stemming from similar thing to poverty. And poverty is the mother of all revolutions. We must agree on that. And we must agree that the productive people in any society which is poor, which is suffering, which is having people who cannot even get a meal a day, the productive people tend to suffer the envy. And that envy is stemmed as fighting capitalism. Societies like that, they start calling this is a capitalism state, but capitalism in its own way, Odong, you know it very well, that all of us, we must aspire to be productive and to be unique from others. But we must also understand that we have problems in Africa. We are surrounded. South Africa has been an envy of very many, and that's why you've seen very many people trying to go to South Africa. It has been an envy of very many people in Africa. Everyone has been dreaming to go to South Africa. But then we must ask ourselves, where do people want to go and why do people want to go in South Africa? Because they are, I think, people who have created jobs, and people outside, they realize that that jobs may be able to, either the environment may be able to allow them to earn a living and send the money back home. And that's a problem. I don't want to go to this. It has been a complaint that the whites are the one dominating in South Africa. But I would say the whites have invested a lot in seeing that they fit in the economy and they also take advantage of the economy of South Africa. They may be having some historical strength backing them up because of what the system left, and it left them into a good position. But we must also, as African, as I conclude, aspire, as we want to go into African continental free trade working better, we must make sure that our borders should open to people to cross, goods to cross, and all other unique things we have from other side of the border. They should be able to cross so that we can be able to gain in. And that's one way. If we look at the European Union, at least we have seen that you can cross from here and there and then you gain. But also European Union has some poor countries. It has countries with populations which are poor. They keep loitering in France and everywhere. But also they are facing some realities. But I think we should first look at economic freedom before we look at any unity. Let the economics unite us and let economic freedom let us to grow, and then at a later stage we shall have the unity. Unity will build spontaneously. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, John. And this is coming at a time when we are going to wrap up soon as we go to watch South Africa battle with Mexico. Okay,
I will have to support South Africa no matter the xenophobia.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
Can I go ahead?
Nana? Yes.
Yes.
Let me.
How are you all doing? I've been following with keen interest, Tyson and Mugabe
yes.
and Arthur. Nice to see you again. I always want us to look at the whole thing. Anytime I hear politicians blaming poverty and competition, I wonder whether we are speaking the truth. This did not start only today. It was engineered. In the 1970s, apartheid had to go for millions of Black Africans from other countries. When they brought them, they placed them in separate areas so that they would not be connected together, right? They underpaid them, they had no freedoms, and they created an environment where we couldn't work together, and that was the plan. It went on to the point where the locals hated them because the system pitted them against each other. In the 1980s, apartheid needed a culprit, right? So in the 1980s, because they were internationally isolated, apartheid made them a scapegoat. There was a massive propaganda in their language, Xhosa and Zulu, making it clear that these foreigners are the problem. So it continued, and around 1988, over 400,000 were deported. 1988, 1994, ANC inherited this, what they call the poison well. Instead of healing the divide, they exploited it. In 1996, over 100,000 were deported, right? And as we can see, Africans were seen as a problem, not other races, Black Africa, right? The economic deliberate narrative were crafted to divert anger away from the government failures. Violence escalated. What I want us to believe is that this script was written during the apartheid. We all talk about competition, poverty. That is not it. The whole thing was to make sure that we hate our kind, to reduce the number. Now, I repeat, xenophobia was started by apartheid, sustained by ANC. And we have to realize that ANC used it as a political survival. Until we get this and understand the issue, we are going to have a problem, right? And I believe that once we become dominant in business, and once we can write some of these things in the local language, Zulu, Xhosa, they have to read it on their own, build that stability, make sure they learn from each other. We are not going nowhere. And that's my belief. Until the root cause is done, because this one is an engineered hate against Africans. It's Afrophobia, it's not xenophobia. We are isolated here. Thank you very much.
Okay, I like the aspect of making it Afrophobia, not xenophobia. Anyway, it's a good. Anyway, let's go with parting shots, because at the end of it all, this is the learning point, because we know very well that Africa is locked up in one bondage. The borders are just, political dimensions. Now let's have solutions in just a quick takeaways. What could the entire Africa learn from this? And then how could Africa really make it better where things are not okay? Beginning with Comrade Tyson, and then we get to Comrade Nana, then Mugabe, you wrap up, and then we call this a call. Comrade Tyson, what could be done better? What can Africa, the rest of Africa, learn from it? You've talked of media being sold in a different way. Try to give us a learning point from this entire thing. Comrade Tyson.
No, thank you, Odong. I spoke earlier about Afrocentrism and, as a way to push Pan-Africanism. So as an Afrocentric, I was discussing today with my sister that perhaps we need to take a stance. We need to really find our positioning in the world, in the global world as anti-capitalists. Because capitalism, I know that Socrates would then want us to compete with one another and aim for invention, which is laudable perhaps, but there is a point where our values are all lost when we become capitalists. So perhaps as an Afrocentrist, I become an anti-capitalist. And in so saying, let's take what President Boko said in Botswana. You know, he said something about what Traore can do in Burkina Faso versus what he can do in Botswana, which is basically what the African Union can do. Nothing. He said Traore can think in the morning that uh, production of tomatoes must be done locally, and he pronounces that and it becomes a reality. But because you and me are locked up in systems that are created by imperialist capitalists, we are still trying to go on the step by step progression of the system, but we are losing the entire plot because the plot becomes that we are exploited as a continent and we identify as individuals perhaps because uh, you know colonization and the invasion of Africa was that traumatic that we cannot realize our identity outside colonial borders. We cannot realize our identities outside colonial definitions. But we need to. If I can justify Africa as a punching shot, if I can justify South Africa rather, let's compare the legalities. If we look at the legalese, I think Nana was speaking to the point of what Lesotho. No, actually, it was what South Africa did to Lesotho in the 80s, just so that there would be a coup in Lesotho. They knew that if they returned the people who were working in the mines in South Africa back to Lesotho, there would be unemployment in Lesotho, and therefore there would be a revolution of sorts, which is the same thing that's happening in South Africa. Small revolutions that are sparked by unemployment. The same thing that happened in Ghana. There's a bag that is named after the Ghana people when Nigeria said that Ghana must go. Those are the legalists of the entire debate. If you want to recognize Mozambique as a country, if you want to recognize CAR as a country, you must also want the same for South Africa, and then you are going to have to apply by their rules. Of course, each and every country will have a positioning against illegal immigrants. But the fact that when it comes to being us being South Africans, we
As
actually
you wrap up,
we criminalize people. Yeah, okay, I'm coming to the end. We criminalize people, which is the wrong thing. We criminalize people rather than solving the crime. Which illegal immigrant, which immigrant committed which crimes? The crimes are committed by the immigrants, illegal or otherwise, who are in the posh suburbs of Cape Town and Johannesburg, who are in Waterkloof and Sandton. Those posh suburbs are where the manufacturers of drugs, if such exist, they are in those places. Those are the millionaires who are able to afford the expensive cars that makes our blood boil. But then we do not target them. Who we target are the squatter camps because, as a people, perhaps we are weak. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. As I'm going to bring in Nana, Comrade LM, quickly let us know your concern, then we finalize the session. LM, briefly unmute and make us know your concern.
Yes, thank you very much, Comrade Odong. I apologize for coming in late, but the discussion was kind of very intriguing, and I felt like maybe I would give in my views on one or two occasions. But I would simply first rhyme on the questions of other worlds or other parts of the world and how they are managing immigration. Immigration is a very complicated scenario that sometimes, if at all, it looks like it is not being managed systematically, legally. It creates justifications for some of these attempts that other Africans assume are more of justice in nature or justifying in nature. So I give an example of USA. You see them right now. The biggest policy direction that Trump took on was to send away the illegal immigrants, he argued. Talk about even Europe, you'll see most of the people who are being drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. I don't know if that is still happening, but that's how sensitive immigration is. It might not be only just an economical issue, but it also comes to planning and administration. So, to some extent, we could argue that South Africa's situation could be more of an ideological disorientation, but in other cases, it could also be more related to the economic realities of the country, and those things can be argued in other angles. But to singly argue that South Africans are being disillusioned, are being illiterate or irrational in what they're trying to do, is to ignore the facts. And I think, just as Karl Marx argues, that to be radical is to understand things from their roots. How can you radically solve some of these issues if at all you don't know what is the cause? Apart from the apartheid regime, and apart from what the legacy that Nelson Mandela left that had loopholes, what are the solutions? Is South Africa being too big for them to handle? Why don't they now disintegrate South Africa into other singular countries? Because it seems like South Africa as a country itself is too big for the government itself to manage immigration. And if that's the issue, if it can be handled in that way, probably I think to some extent maybe they would easily handle these South Africa when it's divided. But I think that also comes to issues of the frustrations that
As you wrap
might.
up, LM, as you wrap up.
Yes. I think it also comes back to the frustration that we tend to have as citizens of a country. Sometimes ideologically, we might not just say that we are hating others. We are just seeing things from the perspective of what we are not gaining, our interests not being fulfilled. So I'm not trying to side with South Africa, but I'm trying to see what are the issues. We see South Africa uh, as um, as an epitome of success in the African continent, but are we really solving the problems that are making other parts of the country to run to South Africa without legality? I think those are things that can also be discussed. I believe those are things that can be improved to some extent, because even those who are legally in South Africa might have issues because of this whole anger that is now being spread all over anyone who is now not South African. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Yes, you bring a very important issue of legality that we even know very well that in the SCFTA, in as much as there is agitation for open borders, but still there are protocols that have to be respected. There has to be documentation, though the issue is the ease of processing some of these documentations. I get your point, Lem, whereby we should not just throw down the essence of legality just because we need this entire play of freedom. Rule of law has to be put in play. Rule of law is necessary. You need to be registered. You need to be known. You need to be captured. Okay, Comrade Nana, can you give parting shots as, yes, we prepare to go support South Africa?
Yeah, but I'm watching this. Okay, but anyway, what I will say here is this: we have to embrace ownership. Ownership mentality. We also have to embrace business globally. We have to understand the issues, but we have to also understand the underlying effects why we are here. And once we can connect with each other and think big and learn real business, I think we can solve this. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope we'll talk again.
Thanks very much, Nana. And yes, it's beautiful. When LM cited something about the immigration in the US, I almost asked, how did you survive? But nevertheless, that's good. Comrade John, can you give your final parting shots as wrap up?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I would like to first of all thank everyone for the solution they have put in place. It's very true. We need to look at trade beyond even our borders as one of the solutions. But also we must understand that we as African, we have the past, and that past has colonialism. It has conquest, part of it. It has slave trade as part of it. But if we are going to change the present, we must not carry those blames. Because in Africa, we have two countries which are also grappling with serious problems, but they were never conquered, they were never colonized. If it was colonialism, I think Ethiopia would be very far because it never was it colonized. We look at Liberia, many who even came from America as a free land. I think we have to put our eyes on what is wrong with us. There is, and as long as you say, the institutional problems. The South Africans have land, but we should look at the property rights maybe in South Africa. There has been a debate on property rights, and for so long in South Africa it was ignored. I even once wrote about it. Do the South Africans have property rights so that they can be able to utilize what they have and get what they don't have? Maybe we need also to look at that institutional property right. We must look at the ability of us as Africans. How do our government put facilities in place and policies that enable us to create wealth even through moving outside our own comfortable borders? Can we be able to trade with Kenya? Can we be able to trade with South Africa? And how can we be able to help our own people so that they can be able to do that? And then next, this issue of freedom and responsibility. You know, I don't want to call this a moral dilemma, but I was watching the Champions League final. After PSG winning, the whole parish got on fire because people were celebrating. They started rooting shops, they started doing this. But some brought up the issue of poverty. The context of Africans are ignored. That's why they celebrated through looting. And many of them were not South African, but also the moral dilemma. And I think I appreciate the courage of South Africa and the radicalism Remas talks about, but it is not going to solve problems. We must look at the major problems which we have and start building institutions, start making sure that an African can be able to make even a business wealth where he is. So the problem of South Africa is also partly institution, and the land question is still being debated. But since today it's about migration, xenophobia, it has been left aside. But a very big part of South African should be utilized, should be used by South African and all those people who are there so that they can be able to live in their country, to live in Africa peacefully, harmoniously as they develop themselves. So I want to conclude by saying this to all the Pan-Africans here, that it's true, the history of the whole world was part of colonialism, part of conquest. Recently, I've been in the US, but I also saw the Spanish. I've been to Spain. I've also been seeing how Spanish lost. The conquest came in, the Arabs took over, and so forth. Asia is part of that history also. But we should also ask ourselves, how rarely hear the Chinese blaming blaming the colonialists or the American, the British, and others. What they are competing for now is AI, is maybe cybercrime, is what they are competing. So Africa, we must also be able to start looking at how we solve our own problem. I know the world is also having sometime competition. There are some countries which would have their national interests overriding the other. We know that in international relations, that some national interests would want to override the other because of A and B. But we have overblamed ourselves, we have overlooked at our history, and we are keeping this blame and passing it to our children. We must wake up. We must know that even if I'm in Uganda, I need freedom. I need to see the institutions working. I need to see a free market all over Africa where I can be able to trade with a South African without engaging in the government. The taxes should not be as exorbitant as it is. We must have all this working. Then I believe Africa will be on the right road, and the 21st century may be towards its end. It may belong to our Africa. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, the panelists of today. Thanks very much, Mugabe John Socrates from Uganda. Thanks very much, Nana Oteng, currently in the USA, but with the roots in Ghana. Thanks very much, Tyson, for the time, and thanks very much again for the addition. I want to appreciate all the audience that came into this session. It was proudly brought to you by the Africa Liberty Network, that is a conglomerate that is ensuring the policy talks and the policy edges of Africa are really brought to the best and to the lights for the betterment of Africa, that are powered by its members, who are quite many from different parts of the country. But what I want to adjust is let's follow the YouTube channels. For those who came in late, all these sessions will be shared on the YouTube and all our social handles. will remain the policy in Africa dialogues. Thanks very much for tonight. Have a blessed night and go enjoy your World Cup. Be blessed on behalf of Africa. Thank you. Bye-bye.